All right, guys, you're out flying and your canopy or your engine hatch of your turbine aircraft or your aerobatic aircraft falls off. What do? Well, you fix it. And that's what we're going to do today on this episode. All right, guys, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to the next project we have queued up here. This is a quick little one, but we're solving a big problem that the owner's having with this aviation design Scorpion plane. He's had a couple issues with the canopy popping off and also the engine hatch popping off as well too. So he's enlisted me to help him fix his problem, and that's what we're doing. So it's going to be a fairly quick little fix, but we do have to wait for our glue to dry and things like that. But I'll show you guys quickly kind of what the problem has been and probably the reason for the problem. So let's hop into this. All right, guys, firstly, the engine hatch. Now, I think this has popped off once, and I'll show you guys quickly what probably the reason for it is. So at the rear of the engine hatch, we've got the normal spring-loaded latch. Now, of course, if you're putting this hatch back on and you don't push it in all the way and that's not latched all the way, of course, that's a chance that it's going to pop off. But I think the reason for it is there's a little bit of play on the front of the hatch. Now, when we pull this hatch all the way back, you can see the gap opens up a little bit here. And our pins are quite short. We've got about 3 millimeters of actual contact surface area before the bevel starts, and our gap when we pull this engine hatch back is about a 1.5 millimeter gap. So the solution for this basically is we are going to sand out the pins, the existing pins. I have purchased some, this is 5 millimeter rod, so I needed, or maybe 6 millimeter rod, I can't remember, but I have purchased some replacement rod to make sure that it's metric and it's the right size and it fits inside the existing holes. So that should be a fairly easy replacement. So that's one thing we're doing with this plane. Now the next one, probably the biggest one, is this canopy has come off 2 times for him. We do have a spare canopy here, and I'll tell you a little story about that. This canopy, last time it fell off, it was lost and he couldn't find it. That's why he ordered the replacement canopy. So now he's got a spare canopy, and which has kind of worked out good because we're going to get both canopies fit exactly the same way. And then if he wants to make one of these, like this one that has a couple scratches on it, if he wants to put a cockpit in there with a pilot, it'll be a lot easier and he'll have both options available. So this canopy is very similar to what was done on my Diamond. Has the rear hatch back here, or the latch, which is fairly normal. We've got a decent amount of pin contact there. I don't think that's the problem. I think there's 2 problems here. The first problem is, if you look at the angle of this front pin, it is really dumb because any sort of vertical force and the pin's not really doing anything. So I think that's the first problem. This is at just purely the wrong angle. My Diamond has a hook that comes down and goes forward about 1.5 inches, and it just makes way more sense than this silly pin idea. So I don't know why Aviation Design did that, but I think that's a poor design. The second thing is this airframe is all open, right? So you've got there's no gear doors on it, so you've got your nose area completely open. So if you're flying this thing around and it's going to be creating pressure inside the airframe, or it can create pressure inside the airframe. Main gear is the same way, so it's wide open to the airframe. So I think we've got 2 things happening here. Number 1, a poor pin design. Number 2, pressurization of the airframe. So now we can't fix that, but obviously we can make this a better design. So here's what I'm going to do to fix the problem. And of course, like I said, we're doing both canopies at the same time. So number 1, we're going to put a nice big hook on the front of the canopy. That's going to lock in with the existing airframe and just work beautifully. It's going to be a way better design. Second thing we're going to do is something kind of like what I did on the Diamond build. We are going to add not hooks on the side, because this should be no problem taking care of the canopy, but we're going to add probably 2 tabs here and there, roughly halfway down the canopy. I'll have to see, I'll have to figure it out and play around with it, but basically we just want a little tab that locks in. Now the reason is this canopy doesn't have a lot of slide like my diamond. My diamond kind of slides into place. This one kind of drops into place. So I understand why they did the nose this way, but it still doesn't make any sense to me. So guys, that's what we're doing. I'll show you the process. I'll show you my mentality behind things, my mindset behind things, and of course the final product and the steps along the way. So thanks for tuning in. And let's get busy with this repair. Step number 1, we've got to get those pins out of the front of the canopy and also the front of the engine hatch. Got to get rid of those things before we can do anything. All right, guys, when you're doing this kind of thing, you don't need to get rid of all the old epoxy. There's only going to be so much of it that's gripping onto the pin. So I got most of it ground out. There's still some on the back side of both pins. But once I've gotten to this point, I can take pliers and just grab these pins and pull them out, which I have already done. So I've basically doubled the amount of pin that's sticking out now. It's still solid the way it is. But what I'm going to do now is take high sol and I will re-glue this area, and it's actually going to be a better bond because we've used the Dremel and there's a whole bunch of the pin that's actually been ground out now. Previously it was smooth, so this should actually be a better bond to the pin. We're going to pull this one out just a little bit more to match, but looks good. So that was a fairly easy fix. Just got to glue that up. I've already pre-fit this and it looks really good and fits really well into the aircraft. And obviously there's a lot more contact. So this portion was the easiest portion and that is almost done. There we go, guys. Other than the color difference on the material, basically it is exactly the same except our pins are longer. And the high sol is obviously needing to cure, and then this portion is done. All right, guys, next step is we need to work on the canopy. So there is a piece of plywood installed in here. It starts about there and then comes all the way to the angled edge. So if we want to start this from square one, we basically need to fill the previous hole here. And I think what I'm going to do, this is just my initial thoughts here, is just like my diamond, I'm going to cut a slot out like this to a certain point in the plywood, probably about halfway onto the plywood. And then our hook's going to undercut the plywood by about 1/2 inch or so. So that's my initial plan. All right, guys, the next day and our high sol is all cured. This tape was on the inside. So that is done. We do need to sand this down a little bit to make it flush with everything else, but that's a pretty simple step. So next thing I did was take the pin out of the first canopy or stock canopy. So all I did was take my Dremel and sand out the glue around the pin. And you don't have to get it all out, but once it is mostly out, just grab it with pliers and pop it straight out. Next thing I did to get a little bit more distance out of this pin, I ended up getting about 2.5 millimeters of extra extension just by taking my X-Acto blade and cutting that little area out. So the area right back here, there's a little bit of buildup and stuff, so I just took my X-Acto blade, cut that out, and now we've got more extension on the pin. So this is the pin that we need to install in the other canopy, the new canopy. So what I did was take painter's tape, put it on the back edge of the canopy to create a template. Now this painter's tape, because of these angles, doesn't follow this line perfectly. So what I did was basically just put it in place, cut off the excess back here, cut off the excess back here, cut out the engine hatch portion or the little portion right here. Now what we can do is we can take this and we can transfer it onto the new canopy and we'll have this exact spot where we need to put this little cutout. So that's the next thing to do, and that's what I'm going to do. All right, guys, so there is the channel cut into the new canopy. Everything worked out good. I've taken my calipers and I've measured to make sure that our opening is the same distance, and it matches perfectly on that one. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do the hole for the actual rod coming out, and that should be fairly easy to match up. Just going to come straight out and then go down the same distance on the new canopy. All right, guys, so this is now glued in place. Just got to be careful because I used standard high sol, so it's going to take a while to cure. But there's a shot of it in there. And it was pretty simple to get set up. I use, the other one is square, so I use this block and just make sure that everything is sitting nice and square. Additionally, when you look at the angle here of the existing one, the rod that goes into the airframe is basically level with the top of the canopy, or the bottom of the canopy in this picture. So there's the one we're gluing together, and here's a shot of the existing canopy there. So we just want to try and make it obviously match perfectly. All right, guys, so what I did was cut two identical tabs here for the canopies. I actually got this lower measurement and shape from my diamond canopy and then just added this extension on, but they both match perfectly. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my Dremel bit, this skinny one that almost matches the thickness of this piece. Now this piece is some fiberglass laminated plywood is what we're going to use for the canopy hooks. And I've marked this area out in Sharpie, and we are going to basically Dremel this out. So essentially this can fit in place and slide forward, sort of like that. Now I'm not going to go all the way to the end to begin with. I'm going to start shy and work my way forward to get everything lined up properly. But that's what we're doing there, and going to Dremel this out and go from there. All right, guys, so I have sanded down the little bump there of high sol, and I've also created our channel for our tab to go in. So what I've also done is marked the level line on the actual black piece. So I just stick my finger in there against the plywood, push up on it, and then now I know how far to sink this in the actual canopy itself. So we want to have a little bit of tension on it, so basically it needs to be buried into the canopy, something like that. So canopy is going to go in and slide into place. All right, guys, so now that we've got the channel done there, we want to transpose, maybe is the right word, onto the actual canopy. So what we'll do is we'll put a piece of tape down, put a line of paint. You can use a paint marker. I needed a little bit more substance, so I just used some yellow acrylic paint. Anyway, so we just laid that down in the area of the crack. And then what we can do is we take our canopy and we pop it on so it's nice and centered side to side. And then when we pull it up, the slot is marked out. That tells us exactly where we need to install this piece, basically where we need to end it. And we'll do the same thing on the other canopy as well too. But this basically just gives us our distance. So when this piece is inserted, it stops in the right spot. All right, guys, so now that we've got two matching canopies, now is the opportunity to fix the position of the canopy. Now I'll show you what I mean by that. So if you look on this side, which would be the right side of the airplane, okay, our canopy comes down and we're nice and flush with the actual airframe. There's a little bit of a ridge here, so the canopy is proud of the airframe just slightly. If we look on this side, okay, we've got about a 4 millimeter gap between the edge of the canopy and the airframe. Now this is the stock canopy, stock position and everything, and we've got a bit of a ridge here. with the airframe being proud of the canopy. So, really this doesn't really matter, but we're here and it matters to me, so I'm going to fix it. So basically, now is the opportunity or the time to do that. So both of our canopies, the old one and the new one, fit almost exactly the same on the back end. So what we need to do is we need to fill this hole and re-drill the hole further this way. Okay, so not a big deal, but there's a couple important steps here to get this done successfully. So number one, it's going to be very helpful to have backing in here. So what I did was I took my wooden dowel, because all of our access is blocked, took my wooden dowel and I put a little bit of painter's tape on the end, just in a little loop, and carefully worked the wooden dowel through the airframe. And now, may not be able to see it, but the painter's tape is very, very close to the hole. But we can keep that there. We do have some backing. So now what I can do is I can fill this in with high sol and we can let that cure, and then we can re-drill that hole a little bit further over. So one thing I want to do first though is I want to mark out this hole where it was. So I'm just going to take a piece of painter's tape, run it up here, draw a circle, a Sharpie mark around the hole, pull the painter's tape back down, fill the hole, and then when I re-drill it, I can slide the painter's tape back up, and I know I need to go to the right a couple millimeters to split the difference. Now the way this is designed, it's not super accurate, so we're not going to get this set up perfect. So we're just going to split the difference, and we're going to have, try and get a bit of a ridge on both sides and try and split the difference on the base of the canopy as well. All right, so while we wait for that part to cure, we're going to work on to the front hook area. This tape on here is just for when I put the canopy on. I marked the front edge of the canopy with this piece. I marked the back edge of the opening. I didn't really need to do that with tape, but I just wanted to make it visible. And then measured this distance, which is 19 millimeters. Now what I did, just to double check, is I took the measurement from the front of the canopy to the front of the yellow mark, which was 19 millimeters, and then I knew where to mark back from there in order to install the hook. So now what we're going to do is we're going to cut that piece out, probably just using an X-Acto knife because this is just fiberglass, and we'll do that on this canopy. Alright, so because the seam of the canopy is right in the middle there, I tried using my X-Acto, but I ended up using my Dremel, and it worked out beautifully. So what I did was, the joint is, or the opening's nice and tight, so this actually stays in place, and it's fairly solid. I mean, it's easy to pull out, but it's fairly solid. The other option you have is you could put just a little bit of CA on the back side of this just to check fit. So what I've done is I've inserted it a little bit past my yellow line there. I've already trial fit this, which is why I did that. So there's a shot there. We can just see the yellow sneaking through. And then what we can do is we can just slide the canopy in place and check how it fits. So I've got everything on the back side. I've got the pin taped in. I've got all the other stuff taped as well, just so that's not interfering with anything. But this canopy, we just want to pull on it lightly. Yeah, it's nice and snug. There is zero vertical movement there, which is great. Our centering side to side at the front here is wonderful. So that is perfect. So because of the way this is designed, we can also sink that black hook into the canopy just a little bit more. And then if we have to, what we can do is sand this portion of the hook a little bit. I like it where it is, but that's just something to think about if you're doing something similar on a different plane and you don't have the ability to check the fit like this. So I might go just a little bit deeper in there, but I like the fit of that. Now we just need to do the same thing on the other canopy. All right, guys, both of the hooks have been installed. I've just used some thin CA and kicker to get it to stick in its desired spot. So it's stuck in place, but we could take it out if we needed to. Now the fit is very, very tight. So basically I've taken this hook and I've sunken it into the canopy more than I needed to. And like I explained, the reason for that is afterwards we can work on the fit just by sanding this down. Now it'll fit in the airframe, but we want to make it a really, really nice snug fit. So there's probably 1 millimeter of material we need to take off each of those hooks. So what I've done is I've cut out some of these pieces that I had in my parts bin. This one is a little bit different because we've got the old material for the pin that used to be on the existing canopy. So anyways, this is on the wrong side, but these are going to be inserted over the hooks like this on the inside of the canopy. Same thing with that guy. And that's just going to allow more gluing surface and also to stiffen up the area because it's quite flexible in this entire area. So that's going to help with that. So first thing I'm going to do before I glue these on or in is I'm just going to take my Dremel, go from the inside and just roughen up some of this fiberglass on the inside just to allow the high sol to stick really, really well. All right, guys, it's been a couple days and everything is very, very solid. So what I actually ended up doing on the new canopy was adding a bunch of high sol right at the front of the assembly that I installed. Now the reason for that is once the initial high sol cured, this canopy was actually still quite flexible. The original canopy, because it had the pin and all the extra material here, when I first installed this initial assembly, the high sol glued itself to that and it was nice and solid. So now both canopies are very, very solid and neither of them interfere with cutting out the canopy glass, so there's still lots of room in there to add a cockpit on either one and stuff. So now that stuff's done, it's time to work on the fitment of the canopies. So we want to make these things match as good as possible and also fit as good as possible. I pretty much have decided that those side tabs are definitely not necessary. That front hook is absolutely awesome. We're going to check that once it's all fit. And the reason I did it on my Diamond was because when I added that equipment tray back here, it actually created a gap at the front. So I needed to add those hooks for that reason, but this airframe's a lot more solid than my Diamond is, side to side here, and also the canopy has a cross member here, but just in general the canopy's a lot more solid as well. So definitely don't think it's necessary. Obviously if it needs it, we'll add it, but I did put a little bit of high sol in the front here that we can sand down so we can get a real good fit. And the last thing we'll do is drill the hole for the latch system. All right, guys, didn't take much sanding, but just sanded the high sol down a little bit, and both canopies fit wonderfully. I did have to sand one of these hooks. I can't remember which one, doesn't really matter, but they both fit beautifully now. They slide into place. They stop where they're supposed to stop. It's a nice tight fit, and we're nice and tight back here. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drill this hole. Now what I did on one of these canopies was I just put some yellow paint on one of the tabs here, installed the canopy, got it nice and straight, then released the tab. It's a little bit hard to see, but basically we're over a little bit there, just like we talked about, and that's the whole point of filling this hole. So I'm going to start small, and we're going to start down a little bit. So we're going to probably drill the hole right on the edge of this one. We'll see how that fits. We're going to start with a small drill bit, and then we'll adjust it from there. Okay, so now with that drilled, we can take the tape off. We'll try the fit of the original canopy. So the nice thing is it just clips in place. It doesn't actually slide in. So it just hits the tab, and then we're able to check the fit of everything. So when I do that, we've gone too far this way, too far towards you guys. So we'll check the other new canopy. So that one's better. I think the canopies are molded slightly different. Of course, you can expect differences on things like this. When I look down the side of this side, it's different than the other canopy, and our side is actually even on both sides here. Yeah, so it's just me being picky. But so maybe I shouldn't be so picky, but we're just going to make this fit as good as possible between the two canopies. There is a difference in the molding of the canopies, but compared to what it was originally, it will be perfect. Okay, so now we're going to go to a little bit bigger drill bit, and we're going to kind of work it towards me. Okay, so nice and snug. So the original canopy here, so now we've got a nice little gap on the bottom, but because it's molded differently than the new one, it's added a little bit of a ridge on the side. And then our gap on the bottom here is nice and equal to the other side. We've got about a 2mm edge or lip, same thing on the other side, but we're proud over here. So, so that canopy would work the way it is right now. Front looks really good, nice and solid. Zero movement up and down, which is cool. So this one's okay. Check the other one. So this one, it's a little bit more snug on the front end, which still works. We probably will keep it that way. And our tab is really nice and tight. So when I say they're molded differently, I mean, you can expect these slight variances, of course. So now we've got a little bit bigger ridge on this side. We're flush here. And we've got almost zero on this side, and we're almost flush. So anyways, I think that's really, really stinking close. This canopy's not quite clipping into place, so we need to open up that hole just a little bit more because it's tight. So when I do that, all I do is take the same drill bit and just give it a little bit of side pressure, just taking hairs of material off of there. Oh yeah, beautiful. So now when you put this in, you actually have to push the pin backwards, which in my opinion is good. It means it's a nice snug fit. It'll eventually wear in a little bit, but it's a nice snug fit. Yeah, zero need for those tabs on the side. All right guys, couple final steps here on these canopies. What we want to do is we want to treat the plywood in between the two pieces of fiberglass with some thin CA. So I've just taped this area off. Perfect. So we'll do the other one, and then we've got our last step. All right, and as a final step, guys, because we've got the color match for the aviation design, or the stuff that I used on my servo covers, I'm just going to touch up this area right here and that area right there and make it look pretty. All right, guys, well, what do we do when we lose our canopy or our engine hatch or both while flying a plane? Well, first of all, you land the plane safely and then you fix it. All right, guys, well, that is the repairs to the canopy and engine hatch on this aviation design Scorpion. Worked out exactly as I thought it would. The only change was putting those little side tabs on there. Obviously, I've talked about this, really not necessary on this canopy. And because the canopy kind of sets down into place, we couldn't do any hooks or anything like we did on the Diamond. Totally not necessary. The new hook is way better than the previous pin sticking out. And I am 100% confident that the owner is going to have no more issues with this plane having the canopy or the engine hatch pop off. So that's it, guys. If you have any questions about what you saw in this video or any questions in general, make sure you list them down below. Thanks, guys, for tuning into the channel. Don't forget to give the video a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button down below if you haven't done so already. When you do hit that subscribe button, don't forget to hit the bell and turn notifications on, so when I release new content, you guys get notified that I have released a new video. So that's it, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in to the video, and we will see you in the next one.